Thank you so much for listening and joining in on the small group podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share. We would love for you also to send our podcast to a friend. Our goal is to grow and learn as individuals, also to be a help and encouragement to others in journeys of faith and in matters of faith as we talk with one another and learn from you. So please let us know how we can serve better. And again, thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it.
Applying logic to it. This is Small Group Podcast. I'm Ben.
I'm Lacey.
And we are so honored to have a special guest tonight, Lauren Morgan. So good to have you.
Hello. We're happy to be here.
Oh, yeah. And Matthew drove her.
I drove her. I will listen to her talk. Yep.
So you guys have been name dropped, I believe, on probably every episode. So it's finally good to have you guys on here to defend yourself.
I'm sure it's Matthew's name that's being dropped.
No, it's yours. It's
yours.
Yeah.
All
of my wisdom.
You had a lot of traffic out of the silent retreat.
Oh,
that was a big hit.
Love a silent retreat. It's one of my very favorite things to do.
No, the silent retreat was absolutely amazing. I did not know how much I needed it until
right,
and it was crazy because it was like, wow, this is a long time to not talk. I could have just
flies by.
It flies by so fast. I loved it.
Yes, and we're excited because we're planning another one for the fall. So I'm hoping just more people can come or have another chance to do it again. So
next weekend, is that okay?
Yeah.
Is that what I heard? No, but it was wonderful because it was like, because I had time, I could like read a verse, write it down, sit with it, pray over it, like really dive deep into like a verse or a chapter or whatever.
Yes.
I wasn't in this rush of, okay, hurry up and read this because I've got to, I got to go to work or I got to go do this or I've got to chase a 3-year-old or whatever.
Right.
Like, I had time. It was wonderful.
Yes. I love how rested I feel whenever I get done with the silent retreat. Just fully rested and fully just in tune with nature and with God and just able to see all the beauty that's around me that I miss on a daily basis.
Lauren is much more naturally bent towards the silent retreat than I am. It's a lot more work for me to quiet myself and enjoy the silent retreat the way that she does.
I could do it every weekend. Every weekend.
That's
more.
That's kind of odd given how much you have to talk,
Yeah.
We kind of brushed over it. So, by the way, Matthew gets name dropped a lot. When we say Matthew on the show, we're talking Matthew Morgan, our preacher. So you have to talk a lot. So you have to talking is work.
Yeah, that's true. But my personality and Lacey and I have the same Enneagram, and so maybe she can identify with this. My personality wants to keep as much conflict out of my life as possible.
Yes.
And the more time that I spend in quiet, the more time that God, it's the Isaiah, right? It's like the more time I spend with God, the more I realize the work that I need to do and the work that God needs to do in me.
Yeah.
And that can feel like conflict, you know, because it's an internal conflict.
I get that.
And so I naturally resist that.
I get that.
Well, now it's time for... Oh, wrong button.
Oh.
I got my buttons
Jingle
wrong.
bells, jingle yay, jingle good for you.
That's Lacey's button.
My favorite button. Okay, so the icebreaker question for today is, what advice would you give to graduating seniors?
I think I would say the people that you're going to spend a lot of time with are going to really have an impact on the direction of your life. And so you should be thoughtful and intentional and choose carefully who you're going to spend a lot of time with. And that's friends and that's also spouse if you decide to get married. But yeah, that who you surround yourself with is going to have a lot of impact on you.
My answer kind of piggybacks off of that. I would say don't commit right away to a friend group. Like, try to get to know as many people as possible when you first start college, because you're finding out who you are too. And so, I don't know. I think it's really good to just get to know as many people and then make a decision about who you really want to build a relationship with.
Yeah, that was Lauren's problem. She committed to a friend group that I was in, and now she's stuck with me for.
You knew it was coming. You got ahead of that one.
My advice is don't be dumb. Have fun, but don't be dumb. And don't post anything on the internet that you don't want your grandmother to see. And also find your own faith. Find your own faith apart from your family, apart from your friends, apart from like your home church. Like, figure out what you believe and why you believe it. And you don't have to figure it out all in one day. It's a process. So
the advice you gave, Matthew, I feel like I've heard that advice, and when I was in high school. But I feel like that's one of those, and there's so many things like it. But it's like until you get further down the road, you don't really realize, one, that it's advice, or two, how valuable that advice is. And I am not the person to be given advice, so I'm going to default to Dwight K. Schrute. If ever I'm about to do something, I think, would an idiot do that? And if they would, I would not do that thing. So don't be an idiot. That's my advice. Didn't mean to rip yours off there.
no. Just copy mine. It's fine.
At least I got my buttons straight. So we're going to jump right in. So tonight, and this topic kind of stems really from a conversation Matthew and I had at lunch one time, a couple months ago now. And you kind of caught me off guard. We had a great conversation, and then you just kind of walked in and asked me, like, what do you think, or what do you, from your perspective, what do you see as the biggest struggle or challenge, I think, to the church today? And I didn't really have a good answer. And first off, I will say this too, not to put you on the spot or anything, but to have somebody in any kind of role, because I still feel like a young person in the church, even now, but to ask me so genuinely, that kind of conversation meant the world to me, even though I was not ready for it. And I usually try to be very prepared. You guys know me. I'm trying to be prepared for anything. I was not prepared for that one, but it has got me thinking, and it's very thought provoking as far as what is the biggest challenge, because you can get so locked into your personal challenges. What's the personal challenges and stuff. And I'd like to, and actually, I don't know if I got to ask you, what do you see?
If we talked about it. You know, it's interesting because the question is, what are the biggest maybe challenges? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, you asked it, so
yeah. I think I said
that's
that.
What you said.
Because there's lots of challenges. There's.
I think from a group standpoint, and that's what caught me off guard, is thinking from a group standpoint.
Yeah. I think the church is, and it's always been this way, but I think it's the specifics are unique at this time. The church is competing with so much.
Yeah.
For people's attention, for people's time, which is necessary for any sort of formation. Time is going to be a part of that. So the church is competing with so much that people are participating in, thinking about, and I think it's been difficult for the church to establish itself as something beyond these hourly things that we do.
Yeah.
And so there's just this intense schedules, busyness, things like that are a hindrance to trying to grow in your faith and grow in your relationship with God, because there's so much other things going on.
It sounds like you're just like, and this is something that you've been very vocal about: unity. I guess lacking in unity. Not necessarily disunity, but like you said, you can get into that mindset where it's just an hour of church, and that's what church is. But you lack that relationship, that unifying sense.
Yeah, it's a compartmentalized life.
Yeah.
Right. We have compartmentalized our lives so much.
Yeah.
And so
a routine. You get stuck. I get stuck in that routine. As much as I value church, I still like, the three of us, my wife and my daughter, we get stuck on like every Sunday we go to, get Mexican food after church, and you get stuck into that routine, and you start to think about, hey, I'm getting Mexican food, and still today.
And you start to say, this is this is life.
Yeah.
This is what life is.
Yeah.
I heard somebody, a preacher that I listened to for my own, spiritual nourishment. He said, if you're watching cable news 20 hours a week, my 1 hour sermon per week is not going to compete with that, And so when people's lives are their spiritual lives are centered around what happens at the building, that's a huge challenge for the church to say, how do we form collectively? I don't mean a preacher or a group of leaders. I mean collectively as a church, how do we form one another beyond the hour that we spend here?
And that's an interesting thought in itself, that because you say that, we gather around for what's happening at that building. Like you said, it's not necessarily the preacher, what's being, what we think of the normal pattern of church, singing and preaching. It could be, you could go, whatever's happening, whatever event, I'm drawing a blank. I'm trying to think, like journaling or whatever extracurricular type, lack of a better way of putting it.
Football.
Yeah. Whatever draws you together. And so like you could go that way with it, where you're just there for this or there for that. I'm here for the preaching. I'm here for the food and whatever it is, instead of you're still lacking in that relational thing with one another sometimes.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then I think that what happens when we do that, when we compartmentalize, when the church tries to make formation be about what happens at the building, is that we lose out on the intentional formation that needs to be happening on a day-to-day basis, from a discipline standpoint and habits standpoint. I mean, you're going to hear me say a lot from the pulpit and in classes that I teach. I mean, it's not mine. It's any number of people that are writing books right now, that your habits are forming who you are. Your habits are shaping the person that you're going to be in 5 years. And so if you're not engaging with God, then you're not tapping into the only power that really has the capability of changing your life.
Yeah.
And forming you into a person that's more and more like Jesus, and that's the Holy Spirit. And so, if I were to really get about it in one sentence, I would say, what's the biggest challenge facing the church today? It's a disconnection on a day-to-day basis between us and the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. So it's like an individual level. That's what do you concur, or do you want to refute that?
No, I do concur. I also think that the church, well, I've only grown up in the South, so I'm going to speak of the Southern church. But I think the church has become content with just like a shallow spirituality.
Yeah.
They're content, or I guess we are content, to go to church, pray before meals, maybe pray before you go to bed, maybe read a chapter a day, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
And overall, on a daily basis, you might be spending 15 minutes with God. Yeah. Maybe. There's a lack of spiritual disciplines. There's a lack of Sabbath, fasting, meditation, just spending a significant amount of time with God. And that can go back to busyness. Our lives are jam-packed. But also, I think there is a lack of example from people who have gone before us to show us what that looks like.
Yeah.
And maybe they are doing it and we just don't talk about it. I don't know.
I think it's because I can think of some examples, but it's subtle. Because like what you're talking about, it's not like a stand up and here's a lesson on how to be intentional in a relationship with God. But I think of the first one comes to mind. The guy was like an older gentleman in our church, Billy Tolson.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you hear him pray, you're hearing a relationship with God.
Yes, for sure.
That goes, it's very intentional, very personal. But yeah, that spending time with God, that's very interesting because, and it goes back to the personal part too. It's like if you go, on the holiday, you take the family to your family, but I'm sitting there in the living room on my phone, not talking. Am I really spending time? I think that's something worth dissecting. Okay, I'm at church, I might be subconsciously absorbing something, but without that intentionality, are you really spending time? And I think there's still some good that can come from that. I even struggle sometimes, with all these things going on. I may not be in the right mind at least when I first get there. Sometimes there are Sundays where I have gone in and I'm never really getting the right mind. I mean, I still struggle with that, but there's still good from being there, but you still lack that deeper. And that's, I think, what we're getting to is that deeper relationship with God.
Yeah, it's the deeper connection. And Lauren, you mentioned that you feel like the church has grown complacent. And I think that's true. I would also say that I'm not sure the church has a good model for how to move people beyond the stage of faith that is, hey, I go to church, I'm basically a good person by the world standards and engaged in ministry at my church, and I'm connected to community. And that is kind of the goal. And there's a great book that I read this past year called The Critical Journey. And it's about stages in your life of faith, your spiritual life. And the authors say that there's 6 stages of faith. But what they say is that the church has a pathway for people to grow from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. And stage 3 is what we talked about. I'm involved at church, involved in a spiritual community. I'm maybe leading in a ministry in some way. And when that person is doing those things, most churches say, okay, they're the goal that we have. That's the goal that we have for all of our people. Be like that. And what this book argues is that's just stage 3.
Right.
There's a stage 4 and a stage 5 and a stage 6. And the church has traditionally not offered any pathway towards stage 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
And so then you have the most mature people in the church looking for, hey, where's my next frontier of growth going to come from? Because I've now consumed everything. I've grown in every way that this system at this church can grow me. Where's my next front edge of growth going to be? And I think, Lauren, that's what you're talking about. That's where the spiritual disciplines come in.
Yeah.
And it's teaching people to connect with God in a way that it's kind of difficult to do in a collective communal setting like church.
Well, to that point, like, what can the church do about it? That my mind went to one thing, if there's anything, because a lot of it is a personal. It all starts with a personal responsibility, or personal mentality, or personal intention. But repetitiveness, we've talked about repetitiveness so far, as creating a lull and a complacency in your routine. But repetitiveness, and I'm not accusing you of this, absolutely not. But
you can accuse me of it.
Repetitiveness from the pulpit, and I say from the pulpit, very general, like whoever's talking, whether it's a classroom, preacher, because I have seen examples of that where they're teaching, like I'm very sensitive to agendas, and it feels like every once in a while I've witnessed an agenda, because it's the same type. Whether it's grace is an easy one to go to. It's grace, 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 grace. Okay, I have grace. What do I do with it? I'm learning about grace, and that's great, and that's a very important. But what do we do about it? And so getting past, I think that's a very important message, especially with young Christians. However, whatever age you are, when you're coming into the faith, absolutely you need that lesson. But you have, what's the Bible verse where was it solid food? Yeah. Every once in a while you've got to step up your diet.
Beyond milk.
Yeah.
You got to move beyond milk to solid food.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I think that's what you're referring to. And I don't think that I'm a preacher. about to say that I don't think that's going to come through a sermon.
Mm.
At least not someone with my capability.
Yeah.
So it maybe can come from somebody who has has more, and is a better speaker or more wise, whatever. But I actually don't. I don't even think that. I think that it's not going to come through a sermon. I think a sermon, can only do so much.
Yeah.
And I think it is really important for the new Christian and for the Christian that's in, the somewhat early stages of faith. But for someone who, who says, I understand grace. I understand the gospel.
Yeah.
I'm in a relationship with God.
No, that's an excellent point. Because maybe my mistake was saying pulpit, because you're absolutely right. When you're from a preacher, and this is something I do not envy you, you have to balance a lot. You're balancing a large diversity of political diversity, economical diversity, theological diversity. You're balancing that, but you're also not trying to dilute or alter the word of God.
Well, and
But you
also having to balance between baby Christians.
Yeah, that's right.
And people who have been in church for literally 80 years.
That's right.
Yeah, and that was kind of where I was headed with that, because you want everyone to be fed, absolutely. But in that setting, maybe it's more towards, other avenues of the church, whether it's like Bible study and class. Are we offering that, deeper diet type thing? Maybe not in the pulpit, but at least in some form or avenue, because, you think about the kid who gets bored in class in elementary school. What do they start doing? You get bored with it. You want to keep, not that you're trying to entertain, but you're trying to keep them going further and further in their faith, and uncovering more. You brought up that book, the stages. This is something I've been thinking about. I don't know if I'm going to kind of go off the cuff a little bit here, because this is something I've just started to kind of formulate in my mind, because where I'm at in my life, I'm kind of in the middle ground. I'm not, I still, from my standpoint, feel like a younger person in church, but and I'm hungry and I'm wanting to dig deeper and have this passion of wanting to learn more. And, and I think about, and I've heard stories like my father or older gentlemen who were the same way. But then I've also seen those same guys, when they get to the top rung, they're now the leaders of the church. I feel like maybe you've witnessed this, some change in that. I don't see that eagerness and passion so much as now they are at the top. They've been at the top for a while. There's, I feel like, and again, I don't envy that position either, because that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of different, dynamics that you're dealing with than where I'm dealing with. But it just seems like that I find that stage is very fascinating, because you can go from very passionate and hungry, and then now you're expected to make those decisions. Everyone's looking to you, and it does seem to me like maybe there is some shifting and some changes in that passion. Maybe you switch from that passion to more of a defensive. I think that might be kind of like the default is to become, more defensive and protective. In a way.
Yeah, certainly the more that the closer you get to the workings of a church, the more you get to see the ways that God is working, and there's ways that God is working that you get to see that maybe others don't, but you also get to see the ways that every leader, every single one of us fall short.
Yeah.
And we're not living up to the way of Jesus in our life. I mean, so you see that, and maybe there is a sort of a disillusionment, maybe. But I also just want to think it could be just that they're plateauing, right?
I guess that's what I was trying to get to, yeah.
Or that we are plateauing.
Yeah.
Again, because of the lack of creativity about how we move beyond just being a leader in the church. Like what's if you're a leader in the church, a reasonable next question is, what's next for you? Like, what is the next stage of growth for you? And that's actually why I'm so thankful that we're doing things like a silent retreat. Like Lauren and friend Ben has been leading these silent retreats, because to me, that's begins to address the question, what's next, right? It's not more people coming to you and you having an impact on more people, in like that may happen, but that's a symptom. It's instead getting deeper into your own soul. And so I think to me, begins to address that next step.
Plateau is the best way to put it. Thank you for saving me on that. I think that's probably the best way to put it. But I also, and you described it, I think that's the part I left out. It's like I've seen and I've heard stories like, like men my age who were frustrated with the people ahead of them, because they're hungry and eager and they get frustrated and then they get into that role. And it's like, are you just relapsed? It's almost like you go into what you were so frustrated with instead of making it, doing something about it. You finally get through that part and then you just default to this, frustrating. Maybe it's the role I'm in. It's just naturally frustrating. Sometimes you have to go through, but I'm not speaking anything specific. I'm being very general. It's really hard to speak something, kind of abstract, but you kind of get what I'm saying. Like, it's like, what are the things that have aggravated and frustrate you when you get through that part? Maybe you, like you're saying, you understand it better and everything's different, but you can forget about all of that and not do anything about the next group coming up, through that same process. Yeah. Sorry. I got very in the weeds there. I apologize.
No, I think you're right. And I think I heard John Mark Comer say this one time, and it really resonated with me. He said, I'm not sure that more knowledge is going to, any more knowledge than I'm not sure that any more knowledge than I have right now is going to make me closer to God. Mm. And that really resonated with me. Is there more that I can learn about the Bible, about the history and the text? And absolutely. There's a ton more that I can learn about the Bible. And I'm a little skeptical that is going to lead me to a much deeper relationship with God. Yeah. In fact, I'm not convinced at all that it's going to lead me into a much deeper relationship with God. I think that it's going to be something that's not information that leads me to a greater, deeper relationship with God.
No, I agree with that too. And John Mark Comer, he's also said, those who, you don't have to be a biblical scholar to have a relationship with God. In fact, it almost does you a disservice, those who aren't diving, through the ancient texts and translations, those who just can hear and accept and believe, like, it's almost better to have a relationship at that level. But it's at the same time, I agree with that, and I agree with what you're saying. I've also, in my experience, I've gone to where I've dug deeper and I found, a little bit more information, and it's done worlds for me. But at the same time, and as passionate and hungry as I am to dig deeper, I'm constantly having to check myself. Why am I doing this? Is it just to know more, or is it to have that relationship? It comes back to the relationship with God. But when you have those moments, those aha moments where everything clicks, I get kind of like hooked on that, and I'm looking for more of those aha moments where everything just falls into place.
Have any questions or any topics you would like us to discuss, or just have comments about anything we discuss here at Small Group? Then please email us at goat.bear.lobster@gmail.com. You can also reach us at our website, smallgrouppodcast.wordpress.com. Find more on how to reach us in the podcast description.
Well, James talks about how the trials and the struggles that we go through, and that is what forms us into the image of God. But we're not always going through a trial or a struggle. So how do you become formed into the image of God when you're not in the dark pit and you're not struggling and you're not, just leaning on God every second just to survive. And I think that's where, fasting and Sabbath and creating these dynamics in your life where you're denying yourself and putting yourself in a spot where you are reliant on God. If you're Sabbathing, you're relying on God to make sure you have enough money to live on because you're not working. When you're fasting, you're relying on God to give you the strength to make it through the day because you're not eating. And all of those practices take a lot of time. You're saying, I'm going to give up a whole day of my week. Or if you're meditating, I'm going to give up a whole, 20 minutes of my morning to just sit and do nothing productive. And I think those are what I have experienced has catapulted my faith and my transformation personally. When I'm not in the middle of that struggle or trial. And I just wonder, as Americans, if we have a hard time with that because of our busy schedules. Like I said, we've jam-packed everything. So it is hard to say, okay, we're not going to do any sports and we're not going to do any chores and we're not going to do any work one whole day a week. We're just going to be at home and enjoy each other. That's definitely countercultural.
Yeah.
Or I'm not going to eat for a whole day. That's countercultural for sure. Or I'm going to sit and be quiet and not even think about like the next task or scroll on my phone. Yeah. I think it requires a lot, and I'm not sure that very many people are willing to give that up.
It speaks directly to another struggle, instant gratification.
Right.
And that's one of the hardest things to overcome, because to me, I feel like what you're talking about, those things that you have to work and do or work towards, not just spiritually, but you think you hear stories of, I worked to pay for that and it means more because I earned that, whatever. Until you've actually done that, then it starts to become a little easier. I remember graduating college was one of those moments for me, because I was like, I'm never once during college did I think I was actually going to graduate, and I ended up graduating, and it was like, man, it's one of those things that you put in, you finally do it. And it's until you actually witness and taste that, it's a very hard sell of, hey, just put it off. And especially now when, everything's at a click of a button, you can have food delivered to you. You don't have to get up.
Well, and to your point, because I was trying to put that into words. So you did. So you read my mind. It's a great job on that. But I feel like we do get closer to God when there's a hospital involved, when there's a funeral involved, when you've got nowhere else to turn.
Exactly.
And so, but when life is good, it's easy to say, oh, God is good, moving on with my day. But also we are so busy.
Even if you think to remember that during the good times.
Right.
Yes.
That's the easiest time to forget.
Right. No, absolutely. And it's, and unfortunately we all have bills to pay.
Yes.
And, there's always something to do. There's always somewhere to be. There's always, so it's hard. It's absolutely hard. But unfortunately it usually, in my case anyways, it does take a funeral or a hospital or something to wake me up and just be like, oh, wow, all the checklists and the cleaning the baseboards and all the things, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah. I mean, it does, because again, I like the roof over my head.
Right.
I want to keep that. That's a very good thing. But it, it takes that shifting of your priorities, and it's so hard.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think it is a tough sell, because when you're meditating, you're literally sitting and doing nothing, and it feels like nothing is happening. It's not regularly like a normal thing for me to get a message from God. That does happen, but that's more of a rare occasion. And so you're trusting that God is working during that time. And I've heard it said that when you're meditating, it's like taking a tiny step forward, and it feels like you didn't move at all. But then if you take a tiny step forward for years and you look backwards and you realize, oh no, I've really made some huge leaps and it's not by my work.
Right.
My work was just to show up. It's by the work that God was doing during that time that I didn't even realize was happening. But I mean, that's a hard sell. You're going to sit and you're really going to do nothing, and it's going to feel like nothing. There's nothing. There's no gratification at the end. It's like, okay.
Just to be silent to the point that you're turning your mind off, that entails so much work to me that it's like,
I'm not good at it.
That's exhausting. Right? And that's where it comes. That's where it's hard, because it's like, there's so many other things to do, and it's not instant gratification. It is a slog.
That's what I was about to say. There's always so many things to do.
Yeah.
If you wait until you don't have a lot to do, you won't do it.
Yeah.
If you wait until you're like, I can spare a whole day of the week to Sabbath, you'll never Sabbath.
Right.
Like, it is a decision to make. It's a hard but intentional decision to make. But I do think if we can recognize that is what God is doing, He's moving you one little step at a time, we can understand why Satan would want to come in and say, hey, let's do anything else but that.
Yeah.
Just do anything else but that. And I remember Randy Harris, a professor at ACU, he would say that God's best work is done in suffering and in silence, which is what we've been talking about, suffering and silence. And he said, I'm choosing silence so that God doesn't choose suffering for me, right? Like, God loves you so much that He's going to bring formation into your life. He's going to form you into the image of Jesus. And the more that we can allow for the silence to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's going to stop you from suffering. It's not. But it will bring that consistent growth, and you don't have to wait for these big steps forward when you've been suffering, because you've been taking little steps all along the way.
Well, and even the suffering too, and that's something that's come up quite a bit in our podcast and our buddy Kyle's podcast we've both been on. Finding appreciation in the suffering, that's something that I've grown a new appreciation for, is just value in the suffering.
Yeah, count it all joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes back to that work that you put in. It's like you want that suffering to be over so fast, especially initially when it sets in. It's uncomfortable. You want to get out of it quick. That suffering that comes in and just lingers and lingers, and you're praying and you're doing everything you feel like. And it took me, I'm just now feeling like I'm getting to a place where I keep coming back to what God tells Paul when he's praying about the thorn in the flesh. There's my grace is sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
There is strength in the weakness. And I usually have Taylor to quote it for me, because I always miss my paraphrasing. There it is. My grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfect in weakness. By the way, that's 2 Corinthians 12:9. I just kept that line moving in my head, because it's just like you start to find, okay, I'm here, I'm suffering, whatever it is, I'm going through this. What is there not to be necessarily be gained? What is there to learn? Am I learning? And I, like you were talking about, Matthew, I've grown so much closer to God in those struggles. And like Lacey was talking about, when things are good, you say, thank you, Lord, and move on. I'm so quick to just move on and not even say, thank you, or even dwell on it very long.
Yeah.
But the suffering forces you to dwell on it,
And you can really start to see, like even in that verse and what we've been talking about, why people would call the kingdom of God an upside down kingdom, right? Like, it's so counterintuitive, even, right? Like, could the most important moments of your day be when you are sitting and doing nothing, saying nothing, trying to think about nothing, right? Just sitting. Could that really be the most important moments of your day? And it could, in the kingdom of God. It can, right? Can something like suffering be something that is one of the most valuable experiences in your life?
Yeah.
In the world would say, no, it shouldn't be, right? Like, that's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But in the kingdom of God, it is. And I think it's just beautiful that what God wants to do is say, Satan can bring his worst. And it is in that I want to show you my best.
Yeah.
Because it's a picture to the world of, look at what God can do. Look who God is. He can bring he can bring glory out of what Satan is trying to do. And the cross and the resurrection, of course, is the best example of that.
And talking about countercultural, there's also the idea we're going through an economic period where everybody's struggling financially, and I've just, I think relatively recently started paying attention to what Jesus says when he starts talking about, it's easier for the rich man, or it's easier for a camel to enter the eye of the needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, and that focus on the rich and the poor. That's something I've kind of brushed over in the past, but it's like, we're in a culture of more,
Mm-hmm.
and man, you get all those things that just, and all they do is distract. Because I've gone down that road. I've gotten more. We've been very comfortable, but then when things get tight, and that you start to learn, like, man, I didn't need all that, and I'm I'm happier, and I'm at more peace with less. And to me, that was one of the very difficult lessons to learn as far as being countercultural. Another aspect of that is just, he flips it on its head, and it's so hard to turn everything else off when those things are always in your face. You need more, you need to get this, you need to do that, and just trying to navigate, is that really fruitful for me, or beneficial for me?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the word distraction, and I think that's going back to even the first question of just like, what's the biggest challenges facing the church? I mean, think about all the things that are distracting you from the presence of God in your life.
Just on your phone.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Just on your phone.
And money's one of them. Your phone is one of them. And again, to go back to the spiritual disciplines that cause you to be quiet and to cast those off, Sabbath and silence, and like that's helpful in that way. To say, hey, I'm going to remove the distraction in order that I might kind of experience God with less filters than all the distractions.
We've talked about, the things that get in the way, right? The trials, the things that distract us, the things that, we have to deal with when we're trying to believe, we're trying to grow in our faith. Then there's the concept of, your heart being hardened. It's a little different in the fact that, like, you've become maybe more, not just all of these things have come in, and I'm trying to say diluted, but I don't think that's the right word, but things distract you. You think of it in another way where it's not so much a distraction. It's something that has hardened your heart to where to me, that seems indicative of being aggressive, God, anti-faith, whatever. What kind of things do you think are leading to that today? Or maybe it's the same things that lead to.
I have seen it happen when something happens in someone's life and it wasn't what they thought. It wasn't the way their life was supposed to turn out. They had an idea of what their life was going to look like, and it didn't turn out that way. Or maybe the person that they prayed for that was sick didn't get well. And that hardens their heart towards God. Maybe they had a belief that if they prayed enough, or if they went to church enough, or they were good enough, that God would answer their prayers and heal the sick person, or help them find a spouse, or whatever it is that they're asking for. And that doesn't happen. And so their heart becomes hard towards God. And so I think just that theology that there's some magic formula that if we do it just right, God will give us what we want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point, because, Matthew and I, we were just talking about this as far as accepting God's answer, like you're talking about. And Lacey and I have talked about it too regarding prayer. When you pray, and Jesus tells us, or at least there's certain places where it seems like he's telling you to ask. A faith of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain. be bold in your prayer, ask, be specific in your prayers, all that. But at the same time, navigating that with expectation, like what you're talking about. Well, that's, that healing didn't come the way I thought, whatever. I'm God's blessed me with that I haven't turned. I don't feel like my heart's been hardened. Maybe a little. Maybe it started to a little bit, but rather I've been able to accept. Like Matthew and I were just talking about. Like I prayed and prayed and prayed for this and prayed for this, and then finally it dawns on me like God's been answering my prayer this whole time. I just failed to, it didn't meet my expectation, but He's been answering it the whole time, and I was just failing to recognize it. And I'm grateful that that's where I went instead of, well, He's never going to answer. How often is He answering our prayers? We're just ignoring it or not, being cognizant of it.
Well, I had it was Miss Sante.
Naming names.
I know. So it was.
There's a big delay on that button. I don't know why.
Forgot to warn y'all. He loves his buttons. He loves his buttons. Sorry, y'all. But Miss Ante, she was one of my Sunday school teachers in Luverne, and it was, you actually just sparked this memory about praying for a spouse. I was single for a lot of years, and I was like, what am I doing wrong? And I kept going back to the verse in Psalms about delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. And I was like, I'm doing all the right things. Like, why am I still single? And it might have had something to do with the fact that I might have friend zoned Ben for a decade. Sorry. But she talked to me about it's not necessarily God will give you the desires of your heart, but the more that you delight in Him, the more that your heart matches up with His.
Yes.
And that's more of what it means. And so yeah, and it is hard when you know that God can. You know that God can heal that person. You know that God can answer that prayer. You know that He is all powerful. He has no limit. But will He?
Right.
And when He doesn't, that's when it starts to get really hard and sticky and messy. And
yeah, and I wonder if there is something in that of, it's been a lifelong journey for me to accept the grace of God and to trust in the goodness of God.
You got to acceptance? How did you get there?
I said lifelong. My life's not over. I've still got a journey ahead of accepting the grace of God, accepting the goodness of God. And because when you go into, and I'm not judging anyone, I've had those same experiences where I've had an expectation, even if I didn't realize it was an expectation, and then it didn't play out the way that I wanted it to, and I've got bitterness or resentment or whatever towards God about it. But think about the type of relationship that is. You better do what I want you to do in order for me to feel good about this, you know? And so you better be the God that I want you to be instead of being the God who you are. You are a being and you get to do what you want to do. And so I think if you fully trust in the grace of God and the goodness of God, then you can let God be who He is. And you can trust Him even in those most difficult of moments. I'm not there yet. This is theoretical for me. But you can do that and then without your heart hardening towards Him. And you see that all the time. You see people who have lost loved ones and who have just been clinging to the Lord even in the midst of their loss and have grown deeply spiritual. And so there is something in that of just how do you view God. So I think sometimes a bad view of God can harden your heart towards this false perception, this false idea of who God is sometimes.
Yeah, and what you're describing is humility. And you had a great line Sunday. I had to find it. Sorry, I wrote it down. Humility is not thinking poorly of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. And I thought that was awesome. And it kind of goes back to what Lacey's talking about. You're changing, like you're both talking about. Yeah, it's like you're you're asking for this with expectation, the specific thing, whatever it is. But it's like, as you're growing in that relationship with God, I think as you put it, your desires are changing, but if you humble yourself, not thinking poorly of yourself, thinking less of yourself, and how am I serving God? What am I doing for God? And it goes back to that, we say love a lot, but what is that? It's that selflessness, that unconditional, when we say selflessness, like none of self kind of thing. And you start to really discover what exactly love is. And that speaks to so many other things. Loving God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, you grow stronger in that. And then loving others, which to me gets a lot more difficult. Yeah. It's easier to love a God, like a graceful God that we have, but then to try to show that to others. That's why I got excited when you said you reached acceptance.
No.
How did you get there? I'm still trying to get there.
I do want to add to the conversation about hardness of heart, because it can't, I think you're right, Lauren, it can happen in these experiences of life that don't turn out the way that you want. But I think this because I've experienced it. I think it can happen when you have unaddressed and unconfessed habitual sin in your life. And when you let sin just go unchecked in your life, it's not God distancing from us, but that is a day-by-day decision on your part to distance yourself from God. And I think that it's only a matter of time when you do that your heart does start to harden towards God. And so, it is, in my experience, incredibly difficult for that to then be exposed in your heart and to be made aware of this like sin that you have left unaddressed. It's incredibly painful, but it's also the grace of God, because otherwise your heart's just getting harder and harder and more distanced from God.
Well, and I don't, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I don't think you just wake up one day and go, wow, I think my heart is hard. Like,
No.
I don't think that it's a very slow process.
Absolutely.
Well,
I think for the most part.
And it can happen before you realize it. And it goes back to like kind of similar, the contrast to instant gratification. It's like, we're so, as a whole, or even personally, ranking things. Well, this isn't as bad as that, and that's worse than this. And, so those little things that aren't as bad as other things, you start to, when that creeps in, well, then it just starts to expand and snowball before you realize.
Yeah. And so, Lauren, to go back to I've never heard that quote about the meditation is one small step forward. But habitual sin, unaddressed habitual sin, is the same thing. It's the exact same thing. It's one small step backwards. Yeah.
Well, and I've heard the example of you can think of older people, and you can think of who are joyful people, and then the people who are super bitter, angry, cranky. It's because of the trajectory that they have allowed themselves to go on in this life.
Is it Sunday already? Stepping on my toes.
And so when I heard that example, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. It's really important what we're doing right now, because when we look back, in 30, 40, 50 years, that's going to be what we're doing right now is going to determine where we are.
How many times do you and I say to each other, if I'm ever acting like that when that age, you need to like do something,
Heard that.
But I mean, really, it's not going to be we've arrived at that age and we suddenly start to act that way. Right. Yes, you're exactly right. You're on a trajectory right now that is going to be exasperated when you're older, and that could be great. I guess I'm not saying the right word. It's going to be intensified when you're old. And so if you are on a trajectory of joy and an inner peace and compassion towards people, if you're on that trajectory now, when you're 80 years old, you're going to be way more joyful and peaceful and compassionate than you are right now. But if you're on a trajectory of impatience and judgment and anger, then when you're 80, if you've been on that road for 35 more years, I mean, think about how ugly that will look for me.
But I also want to say, if you are 80 and you feel like you have taken a path that is far away from God, it's not too late.
That's right.
It's not too late. God can still do lots of work.
If you're an
We have a
80-year-old
large
podcast,
80-year-old
Yes.
demographic.
podcast listener.
Well, so back to the icebreaker question of talking to high school seniors. I was talking to one on Wednesday, and I said something about go to the gym now, learn how to cook and eat a vegetable now.
Yeah.
Like go ahead and learn it. I was like, because when you're in your 30s, it's really hard to start those habits. And like I feel like we had those really, really great habits, and then we became parents, and then those habits kind of fell away.
Yeah.
So we yeah, that's a conversation for a different day. But it's the same thing spiritually. Like build those spiritual habits like right now, whatever age you're at, starting now, because with like you were talking about with the fasting and meditation and Sabbath and prayer and all the things, start those habits right now.
But I mean, have some grace for yourself in the seasons of life that you are. And I actually think that every new season of life invites you to reflect on your habits and figure out again what is an actual like practical, discipline program, for lack of a better word, rule of life, I guess, to use more spiritual language. What's a practical rule of life for you right now? It is different with a 2-year-old than it is with when you don't have kids. It's different when you have young kids and you have kids that you can leave at home and not have to worry about what they're doing.
Because my life advice today, it's all about choking. That's my biggest fear. And get through the day without choking.
So that affords you that chance. It's like a natural time to just reflect again, think creatively again about, hey, what is going to work for us in this season?
Right.
And have some grace for yourself as you adapt.
Yes, and you don't have to add every spiritual discipline at the same time, right? So you pick one, and you just start doing it.
Yeah.
I'll go back just a little bit to kind of something I was saying earlier. When you let the hierarchy of sin, you let the little ones in, but you keep the bad ones out. It speaks to another thing too that I think can either harden or at least in adversity, justification. It becomes so, that becomes your justification. Well, I'm not murdering anyone, but I still have this, so I'm good. And it's like trying to get past that point of plateau. Bad with words tonight for some reason, but where your complacency and you can get so stuck there. Justification can stick you there really bad.
No, or like you justify it because you're blaming it on somebody else. Well, I lashed out because that person did that. Or, I did this wrong thing at work because so-and-so did that, like. And
we are running out of time, but this deserves its own episode because I find it so fast. Justification or justifying in the Greek is hand in hand with righteous. It's almost interchangeable, and that's so fascinating to me, and that gives me a whole new appreciation of justification. It's up there with righteousness, and it's what is just, and I don't know, it gets me thinking about when am I justifying something to myself, and when you think of it in the terms of righteousness, I don't know, terrible. I hope that does something for somebody. I know I'm fumbling it, but just to think of it in those terms, is this righteous?
Yeah,
righteous justification, which is something I cannot do, and but I can. I'll never attain it or attain to it, but it's something to aspire to, I guess, if that makes sense.
So I heard, I don't even know where I heard it. It was on Facebook or Instagram or something, where a girl was talking about that she saw a picture of some sheep on a green grass field, and she was like, wow, the sheep are so white and they're so pretty. Well, then it snowed, and then when you looked at the sheep on like with the snow in the background instead, you're like, wow, the sheep are like really dirty. And she was like, when you compare against the world, like, oh my, like, oh, I've got some pretty good standards. Like I'm not that bad of a person compared to the world. But then when it snows, when you compare your sins to God's righteousness, it's like, oh wow.
True. I think there's another step. And this is another lifelong journey that I'm on, that I will probably not arrive to, is at some point you've got to stop like focusing on how dirty you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's not to say you ignore sin in your life, but you start to recognize that I have been justified by Christ, and that sin doesn't have power anymore in me, on me, like it doesn't anymore. And so to truly accept grace is to name sin for what it is, not this thing that has made me dirty in the eyes of God, but this thing that Christ has already forgiven. And, we shouldn't sin in order to receive more grace. But every time that you are made aware again of your sin, it is an opportunity to thank God for the grace that He's given you. And so it is this movement away from shame. I have the same thought. I mean, of course you want to move from my sin's not that bad to, oh, my sin is, compared to Jesus, my sin is way bad. And then it's like, oh,
that's how great grace is.
Jesus has taken care of all of that.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm white as snow,
Maybe you mentioned it earlier. I think you were talking about extending, understanding that grace, accepting that grace, extending it to others. Something that's come up quite a bit, even in this new series I've been working on, Profiles of Faith, talking to older folks. This is something that keeps coming up there too, is appreciating God's grace to the extent of learning how to extend it to yourself. And that's such a slippery slope too, because you could go too far with grace to yourself. I'm not saying God's like understanding God's grace, because you can get flippant about it, I think, and show so much grace to yourself that you're not showing it to anyone else. I think that's dangerous, where you're not showing grace to anyone else but yourself.
That would be problematic. For sure. I don't know. I don't know if you're getting to this, but it's much easier for me to show grace to you, any number of you, than it is to show grace to myself. And and so I do think that's,
and I think part of that is maybe like a defense mechanism, or maybe a fear of you don't want to go too far and show you don't. Maybe it's I don't deserve it. I know that there's a big part of it, but it's also like, if I show myself too much grace, I'm just going to fall into this or fall into that. Like, I need those guardrails, but like, there's a healthy level to anything and everything. There's a healthy balance of going about it, but it is important because, like I said, even 70, 80-year-olds are still grappling with, how do I show grace to myself?
Yeah.
Well,
I just was going to say one more thing. I hope that you've heard like my passion for spiritual disciplines. I'm very passionate about it because it has transformed my life in so many wonderful, amazing ways. And so I was just going to encourage, if you are wanting to learn more about spiritual disciplines or add a spiritual discipline to your life, I really encourage you to try meditation and shoot for 15 to 20 minutes of meditation each day, because that one spiritual discipline has made the biggest difference in my life. My levels of anger and frustration with the world have decreased a lot. It's made me more peaceful, and it has given me a space where God can speak to me more clearly. And so, all about meditation.
With meditation, are you talking about the silence?
Yes.
So
silence.
just silence, so
yes.
not necessarily just prayer. But even though I'm not saying you're discouraging prayer, but
no,
but it is, you're a little different than prayer. It's just complete silence.
It's complete silence. I've heard someone say it's imagining that you've got two rocking chairs and God's just sitting beside you, and you're sitting there and you're just rocking and you're just enjoying being together. You're not talking about anything. You're just sitting in the presence of God.
That picture hits close to home for me. That's If you if you want it to sink in, that's how you do it. Sitting in a rocking chair next to God. That's beautiful.
Yes.
Well, I was not ignoring y'all. Y'all could see me flipping. I was going back and forth trying to find a verse to kind of end this on. And man, that was tough because I found a good one. Well, now we're moving to this. Now we're moving to that. So I went to, this is kind of a default verse for me. This is really what spawned this whole idea of a podcast of, talking about spiritual things, spiritual ideas, not necessarily giving answers, but at least just let's talk about it. Hopefully that would spur thoughts in those who are listening. And it all comes from this idea of Philippians 4. I'll start verse 8. And I know, again, I'll encourage you guys to go read it in context. I'm coming in the middle of a chapter here, but chapter 4, verse 8 in Philippians, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, think about these things. I know we've said a lot, we've offered a lot. If anything, just meditate is great. Also, just guard your thoughts. Are you thinking about good, positive things? Not those things that you're talking about like lead to bitterness and anger. Am I thinking positive in this moment right now as I'm listening? And, I think that's a great, you usually end your sermons with some advice of challenges and whatever for the week. Will that one suffice, or do you have a better one?
Absolutely. I mean, you have a lot of control over your attitude. I mean, it's something we say to our kids.
Yeah.
You don't get to control a lot of your life's events that happen to you. Circumstances are oftentimes out of your control. You do get to control what your mind focuses on. And so focusing on things that are good and true and noble and beautiful. Yeah. Paul says, be transformed by renewing your mind. And I think that's a great way to.
If anybody like me, there's a lot of empty space to fill. So find some good stuff to fill it with. And I hope we did that for you this evening. We really appreciate you guys joining us from all over the world. And also Matthew and Lauren, so glad to have you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
And until next time, thank you guys for listening to the small group.
The Small Group Podcast is a production of GB&L. Find all of our current and upcoming projects, as well as shop the GB&L store at goatbear.wordpress.com.